other thing to know, ribbon-wise, navigation-wise, going from V2 to V4. In V2, everything was tabs. All these little tabs here. In V4, it's sections. So I can expand them all at the same time. I can collapse them all. I can open 2 different sections at the same time, whatever I want to do. So that's one piece that's different from navigation, but at the same time, it's pretty obvious if you're used to the V2 where to find stuff. So now I'm going to start down into my section. In the main section, this component type right here, we have raw material, finished good, and packaging. This can be changed. It doesn't absolutely have to be. It's primarily a reporting field. So it's good that it be correct, but it doesn't particularly control behavior in the system. So if you don't necessarily set the component type, it's not the end of the world. For the question I always get is, what about an intermediate? It's a raw material on one thing, but we make it, you can pick whether it's a raw material or a finished good. Okay. All right, the stock usage field, the only 2 you need to be concerned about are normal and non-stocking. Normal is 99.5% of your items. Those are things that are going to exist in your Vicinity system and in your ERP system. There are things that when you do a batch and you try and post, you want it to send an inventory adjustment to your ERP system. Non-stocking means that I need it for whatever reasons in Vicinity, but it's not an ERP item. The classic example is water. Lots of formulas need water, but a lot of people don't stock water as an inventory item because I don't, I'm not using filtered water, I'm turning on a tap, I don't have an inventory quantity on hand of my tap water, okay? And so I obviously need it in my formulas. I need to know exactly how much water I put into that batch, but I don't need to send anything to my ERP. That's the classic example. You'll probably come up with a few more. It is also the thing that you can do if you do have lab items that you're dealing with that are not yet in your ERP system. It's best to go ahead and keep them as non-stocking until they convert and they're actually in your ERP system. Yeah. Normal and non-stocking when you need to skipping default facility ID because I'm going to do facility ID at the end. Default loss percentage, this is for this item. It doesn't get used very often. The best example that I can think of for where you might need it, and it is where a given item has more loss. As opposed to a whole formula having the loss, a specific item has loss. The best example I can think of is powdered sugar, maybe on a donut line or something, we're sprinkling powdered sugar. You know that powdered sugar is going to go everywhere. I need to use, 2 ounces of powdered sugar to get 1 ounce of powdered sugar on my donut. Something like that, you could put in a default loss percentage. It's not a real common thing. But if you end up in a situation, you'll know, oh, I need it now. The standard cost, know that the standard cost field and the last cost field in Vicinity don't get real hung up on these fields because they are primarily reporting fields. When we do inventory adjustments over to your ERP system, if it's a consumption transaction, if it is a negative inventory transaction, the cost of that item is going to be determined by your ERP system. It's not going to be determined by Vicinity. So these are primarily reporting and play with me type fields of I need to see what happens if the cost of my primary raw material triples next month because I'm in the petroleum industry, and that can easily happen. So these will initially come over from your ERP system, but don't don't generally get too hung up on. There are a few costing scenarios where these are used for finished goods. If you are using standard costing of your end items. So that's kind of a unique scenario. But as a rule, don't get too hung up, and certainly for raw materials, don't get too hung up on the standard cost. Lot expiration days for, it doesn't apply to a raw material, which is what should be dealing with at this point. This will only be for manufactured items. When we put a manufactured item on hand, then it will set the expiration for you in your ERP system by adding that number of days. So if I have 365 in this lot expiration days, if I manufacture it today, it's going to have an expiration date of a year from now.
So if you bring in a raw material, because like our raw materials do have expiration dates, you're saying this would not allow the tracking of that lot?
No. It's just not used for that.
Okay.
Yeah, this is used to be able to set, like on a raw material, you're looking at a document, and based on either that document or your own internal rules, you're setting your expiration date for your raw materials. This is allowing you to set that expiration date for your finished good lots.
Oh, so it's just finished goods. Okay.
Yeah. QC lead time is related to raw materials. When you get into the planning, the MRP, the scheduling, all of that, we have things like the purchasing lead time or the manufacturing lead time. Particularly with raw materials, it may take me 2 weeks to get it from my vendor, but then it takes me an additional 3 days in-house to QC it before it's truly available. Well, I don't really want to play with my purchasing lead time because it takes me 2 weeks to get it from the vendor, and I need to know that. But from a MRP and planning perspective, I need to know that it's 2 weeks plus 3 days before I can use it. So that's why this additional field is here for you, to be able to separate those out. Chemical name, if you want to enter it, and it doesn't have to be a chemical name. If you're in the food industry and you wanted to use this for some other type of name, whatever, you can put that in there, and the CAS number.